Hi, thank you so much for coming to Establishing a Brand Voice with Big Impact. I'm really excited to dive in today to all of the research around brand voice and get to share with you how you can really cultivate your brand voice in a way that will achieve an impact that your company is after. So my name is Emily Little, and I am the Chief Director of Operations here at Content Journey. A couple of things as we get started. If you have questions or comments, feel free to post them in the chat. You can absolutely interrupt me if there's something that you don't understand, or you can hold your questions to the end. Also, if you prefer not to ask your questions in this setting, but you do want to have a deeper conversation around something, know that you can always email me. It's Emily with 2 E's at contentjourney.com. Today, we get to talk about establishing a brand voice with big impact. As I mentioned, I'm the COO at Content Journey. We are an SEO and content marketing company. And one of the fun things that I get to do with our clients is to make sure that our team has a really clear understanding of brand voice so that everything that we produce, all of the content we create for clients, aligns with their brand voice and enables them to achieve their desired impact. I don't actually come from a marketing background. My background is really diverse, ranging from healthcare to education to entrepreneurship and consulting. In all of these spaces, I have gotten the opportunity to work with the companies that I have served to really clarify their brand voice so that they can achieve greater impact. Some of the companies I worked for were around for 25 years, and they really just hadn't spent a lot of time investing in identifying their brand voice or really who they were as a company. Other companies that I worked for have been more in idea phase. We have this idea, we'd like to launch a company. And so they really from the get-go were saying, this is the brand voice that we want to create because we know this is the impact we want to have. So wherever you're at in the life cycle of your business, know that it's always a great time to be honing in your brand voice and to be sure that your brand voice is helping you achieve the impact that you want to create. I'm super excited to dive into this topic. There is a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and begin. To get started, I always think it's helpful to just make sure that we're clear on terms. So what is it that we're actually talking about today when we say brand voice? And simply put, it's your brand's personality. So that personality includes a variety of different aspects, from your values, the words that you choose to use or not use, the tone that you have, the perspective that you take on different things. All of that combines together to form your brand's unique voice. So I think sometimes it's helpful to have an example of this. Your brand name basically is like the label that you've put on your company, and your brand voice is all the descriptions that go with that label. So we do this with people, right? We give lots of people in our lives different labels. So maybe we label someone as the nerd or the jock or the artist. And with that label, we're not just stopping at the label, just like people aren't stopping at your brand name. We associate that label with a lot of different qualities. So when we label someone a jock, maybe we label them as hardworking, or maybe we label them as not academic, right? It could have positive or negative qualities that may or may not be true, but are associated with the label. And the same is true with your brand. So you have this label, and there naturally are qualities, your brand voice, your personality, that are attributed to your brand name. And so the more time you invest in saying, this is the personality we want to be associated with our brand name, the more you'll be able to achieve the impact that you want your brand to create. And to know that different people are drawn to different personalities, just like different people are drawn to different brands. So you want to be sure that whatever the brand personality that you're creating is attracting the people that you're wanting to interact with your brand. So let's look at, how do you establish your brand voice? I think it's helpful to begin by identifying the impact that you want to create. So I know that mission and values can be kind of cliche and talked about ad nauseum in the business realm, but getting clarity around these two things will really provide you a compass and a filter as you move forward in saying, this is what our brand voice really is. And so it helps you have a sense of, this is where we're headed, right? This is our North Star. It's the destination that we're after. And this is what it will require of us. This is how we will operate in order to get to that goal. So if you're able to articulate these really clearly, then it's going to help create a lot of clarity around your brand voice. So I've picked out a couple of different examples that are pretty well known, Patagonia and Nike. One of the first things I want to draw your attention to is in their mission statements and them articulating the impact that they want their brand to create. They're not talking about shoes or coats, right? They're talking about something bigger than that. And so whenever they articulate a mission that's bigger than the product or service that they're providing, it's really attractive to their audience. So it's helping them cultivate an audience that says, hey, yeah, I care about that mission. I want to be a part of that impact. And because of that, I'm going to participate in purchasing and supporting that brand. And so you can do the same thing as you're articulating your mission and values. Create something that's bigger than just the products and services that you provide. Go after an impact that's bigger than that. And it's really going to cultivate an audience that doesn't just, that you don't just grab their attention, but you really get their allegiance. And that's really what you're after when you're trying to cultivate a brand voice that will lead to a big brand impact. The other thing you see is their values and voice. As you think about probably any piece of marketing material that you've encountered for Nike or Patagonia, you see that these things are represented really clearly in every piece of content that they have created, because these the mission and values are intended to create clarity around your brand impact and your brand voice. So your brand voice is going to support your mission and values, and it's going to build your brand's impact. These really set the standard for how you're going to achieve the impact that you want with your brand voice. The next thing you want to do is your research. So the first place I like to start research is by looking in the mirror, looking at yourself. And as you do all of this research, you're just gathering a bunch of data, and then you'll work on analyzing that data as you move forward. So the first thing you can do is audit your content. Look at your social media, look at the blog posts that you're creating, the newsletters you're sending out, look at your onboarding documents, your job posting. And as you read all of those things, what are the things that you see repeated again and again? What is unique about the content that you're creating? What kind of feeling does the content elicit? And just capture all of that data. The next place that you want to go as you're looking inward is to your team. Your team interacts with your brand and is more familiar with your brand than anyone else. And so ask them, why have they chosen to be a part of your brand story? If they were describing your brand, how would they describe your brand in just 3 to 5 words? And then I think it's a good time to begin to look outward. So you want to analyze your audience. You can hop on Google Analytics for your company and see who are the people that are engaging with your brand. What kind of audience do you currently have? Is that audience your ideal customer? If the audience is not your ideal customer, then that's telling you something about your brand voice, right? That you're connecting with an audience that you're not really trying to connect with. And so you need to shift the way that you're saying things in order to connect with the audience that you really want to be connected to. And one thing that can really help you connect to your ideal audience is by creating brand personas. And so as you do that, you're saying this is our target audience, and you're thinking through what are the things that they value? What other brands do they engage? How are those brands similar to you? How are you distinct from those brands? Think about how they engage interpersonally. What kind of language are they using? The more you can clarify who you're talking to, the more you can tailor how you talk to them to form content that really creates the impact that you're after. Another thing that you can do is survey your customers. You don't have to use an actual survey. You can create a survey instrument if that's helpful to you, and if you're able to get like good response doing that. But you also can do this really informally by just initiating conversations with your current customers. Ask them why they choose to use your brand. Ask them how their brand makes you feel. Ask them how they would describe your brand to other customers or to other people. And then you're going to take all of this data and analyze where do you see similarities? Where do you see repetition? that thing should give that similarities and repetition is going to give you a lot of clarity around these things must be true about our brand. But I also encourage you to pay attention to kind of the outliers, because sometimes the outliers can capture something really unique about your brand that needs to be an integral part of your brand voice and can empower you to really focus on that distinctive quality and be sure that you're capturing that in a more thorough way. All of this is going to help you pin down your personality. You can do this next step individually, or you can do it with a team. So I think it's really helpful to kind of personify your brand whenever you're looking at creating a voice for yourself. Think about if your brand was a friend or a person, how would they sound? What do they value? How do they make you feel? And then you're going to come up with a huge list of qualities. And all of those qualities may be true about your brand, but a long list is not usable. And so you want to narrow this down, right? To the patterns that you see. If you're doing this with a team, where do you see things being repeated over and over again? Collapsing that into the 3 to 5 things that are really distinct and unique about your brand. And when you narrow it to 3 to 5, then you know that this is a usable list, right? And this can, you can be sure that you incorporate those 3 to 5 attributes in every single piece of content that you're creating, so that you create a lot of clarity for your audience. Because if you're trying to communicate 10 or 12 different things, it's going to be really confusing for your audience to be able to go, what are they about exactly? And so the more narrow that you can get, the easier it will be for your audience to have a good sense of who your brand is and what your brand voice is. You want it to be truly recognizable for them. Another thing that you want to do in this process is to get clear about who you're not. And so if you've said, hey, our brand is an edgy brand, we want to be known in the marketplace because we are uniquely edgy, you may also need to clarify we are edgy, but we are not rude. If you say our brand is a sophisticated brand, you may also want to clarify we're sophisticated, but we're not inaccessible. And creating some clarity around who you're not will help as you're creating content and help to clarify so that you're connecting to the audience in a really meaningful way. I have just a few examples for you to be able to see. Sometimes it's really helpful to be able to go, okay, I understand all those ideas, but what does this look like in real life? And so as you review just these examples, you can get a sense of brands that you've interacted with and go, oh yeah, I can see. As I have think back to Coke commercials that I've seen, I can clearly see all of these traits captured in everything that they put out, right? They're reminding me that Coke is refreshing. They're showing me and visually how inclusive their brand is. It tends to be fun and upbeat, and there's a classic element to everything that they're putting out. Here are a few more examples. I just wanted you to have a wide range of industries to look at and to see that each of these industries in their diversity really still has just a few brand qualities to their brand voice that are really recognizable for anyone to see. And that is really what you're after. When you create your list of qualities, you want anyone to be able to see your logo, see your brand, and be able to go, these are the things that make up their brand voice. In the field of psychology, there's a lot of work around the big 5 personality traits. And so in that lane, it's believed that people have typically one of those big 5 personality traits makes up an overarching label for a person's personality. And so Jennifer Aker at Stanford used this idea to dive into some research on branding. And she created the dimensions of brand personality. She analyzed 131 brands in 39 different product categories. So these aren't specific to certain industries to establish this framework. And this framework is really used to help you identify what dimensions of brand personality are captured in our brand voice. And so if you want to use this framework and go, okay, I can see that our brand is exciting. I can see that our brand is really rugged. Just like with human personality, sometimes we're not one-dimensional, right? And so I thought about this just with car brands. When I think about Land Rover, I can definitely see how Land Rover fits in the sophistication category, but it also fits in the ruggedness category because their brand is multidimensional. It's not singular. The same thing when I think about Subaru, right? Subaru definitely fits in the excitement category. It also fits in the ruggedness category. And so the same will be true with your brand, that maybe one of these really resonates with the majority of your brand, and maybe you have a multidimensional brand that overlaps with 2 or 3 of these. It would be really rare that your brand would capture all of these. That likely is going to lead to some confusion with your audience so that they don't have a lot of clarity around exactly who you are. And so the more you can hone in on the 1 or 2 brand dimensions that you really want to be after, the more it will create clarity for your audience. Another aspect of brand voice that can sometimes be confusing is the difference between voice and tone. So your brand voice is your unchanging personality of your brand. These are things that are going to stay the same over time. And your tone is really your ability to read the room. And this is what this looks like, that your tone is going to change in the message, the moment, and the medium. And what that means is that when you're communicating with prospective customers, you're sharing the same messages, right? But your tone may be more authoritative with prospective customers, whereas with long-term customers, it's going to be a lot more personable. Your tone also may change in the moment. So different things are happening in the world, right? We had some clients reach out to us and say, hey, we are seeing social media feeds flooded with lots of information about world events. Now is not a time for us to be announcing a new product that we have, a sale that we have going on. Can we just pause all of our social media content? Your own personality may want to speak out on some of the things that are happening in the world. Your brand personality doesn't have to. You get to decide that. What moments will your brand personality speak? What moments will your brand personality hit pause and not say anything? You'll also want to pay attention to holidays. How is your brand going to engage different holidays? What will the tone of your brand be during different moments? Be aware of what's happening in the lives of your audience. Be aware of what's happening in the world. You also want to be aware of the medium. So when you're writing a press release versus a newsletter, your tone is likely going to be a little bit different. You're going to be a lot more professional in the press release, a lot more engaging in the newsletter. The same is true when you're writing on LinkedIn and TikTok. On LinkedIn, you likely are working to engage a more professional target audience, whereas TikTok is a lot more casual communication. So being able to tailor your tone, but keep a consistent brand voice can really help you create an impact. Now that you've established a lot of clarity around your brand voice, you're in a position to achieve the impact that you're really after. To get there, it's really important for you to understand the research around trust. So 88% of people that participated in the Edelman Trust survey said that it was important for them to trust brands that they choose to support. So it's an essential element to be able to create the desired impact. And the need for brand trust is increasing more and more. So you can see that younger generations are becoming more mindful consumers. And this requires alignment and transparency from your brand to gain their trust. You can see in this 18 to 34 category, they're saying trust is more important than any of the other generations prior. And so what this means is that you need to establish a solid brand voice that can be trusted. Otherwise, people are going to shift their spend. So they're willing to move their dollar to a brand that they really can get behind. And so in order to ensure that you create impact, I want to share 4 key elements that you can implement so that you can gain the trust to achieve the impact that you're after. One thing that is really powerful is creating your brand story. People love a story, and they're a lot more likely to purchase from your brand and to share about your brand if you have a clearly articulated story. So a couple things to be mindful of as you're creating your brand story is to be customer centric. So what this looks like, I think it makes me think back to the world of online dating. and I think about going on dates with people. I've engaged them for the first time, or I've met someone new, and I sit there and for 30 minutes, all they do is talk about themselves. It's a real turnoff. They haven't showed any interest in me. They haven't showed that like we're trying to establish a relationship. Instead, it's kind of a monologue that I don't want to be a part of. And so the same thing is true when a customer has a curiosity about you and they show up on your website, and all of the text on your website, all of the things on your website are just communicating about how awesome you are. It can be a real turnoff. They want to be able to find themselves in your brand story. And so focusing your brand on your customer is a really huge way to build trust that will lead to the desired impact you want. And as you're focusing on your customer, you want to make sure that you're still elevating your expertise so that they can go, okay, they are a trusted guide to be able to solve this problem for me. So you don't have to diminish yourself just because you're choosing to center on your customer. The last thing that you want to do when you're creating your story is to be really clear around what action you're wanting your customers to take. Don't assume that they know how to engage your brand in a way that's going to solve their problems. You need to tell them exactly what steps you're wanting them to take, and be sure that you highlight what's at stake for them if they choose to engage your brand and if they choose not to engage your brand. You want them to understand what the win is for them, what's in it for them if they choose to do business with you. The other thing with your brand story that you'll want to be really mindful of is that you want to say the same story in like 1,000 different ways. The more that you're repeating the story, the more that you're using your brand voice, the more recognition it's going to gain for your brand. So remember that repetition drives recognition. Another thing that you want to do is really align your brand experience. So you only have 50 milliseconds to be able to gain your first impression. Again, that takes me back to the world of dating. And I think about as I am swiping on different dating sites, I met my husband on Bumble. And so in just a matter of seconds, I form an impression about someone, right? And that first impression says, I either want to continue getting to know them or I'm going to disengage. And the same is true for you. You have a very short window to be able to capture your audience's attention because there are so many other things pulling for their yes. So you want to be sure that you make an awesome first impression. However, your brand experience is always happening. So even though someone can create an amazing first impression, know that that's not the end. You have to keep engaging them, and you need to make sure that the experience they have is going to be seamless throughout, not just that you put your best foot forward once and then it doesn't carry through. So recently, my husband and I have been looking into getting solar panels for our house. And we found a company that had amazing reviews. Our first impression of them was awesome. And then we got a proposal from this company, a written proposal, and we also spoke with the salesperson. And in both the proposal and our engagement with the salesperson, it really communicated a really different brand voice. And it was one that kind of said, hey, we're gonna, it felt like that we were going to get taken advantage of, and that they were a little bit sleazy, that they were trying to be slick and hide some things from us. And as soon as we had that experience, we disengaged from that brand and said, we don't want to do business with them. So that's something you really need to be mindful of, is that, is your team equipped to carry forward your brand voice throughout your customer experience so that it's really seamless, so that from the very first impression they have of your company to the end of their customer life cycle, they're experiencing the same thing, same values, the same impact, same personality. Your brand voice is consistent. And then you also need to remember that looks matter. That the images that you choose to represent your brand, that the colors you choose to represent your brand are all speaking. They're all a part of your brand voice. So if you're saying the qualities that describe our brand are modern and fun, but the look of your print material, the look of your website is really dated, that's telling a different story, and it's confusing to your customers. And so you need to make sure that the look and feel of your website really aligns with the things that you're saying you want your brand to articulate. The colors that you choose create emotional connection. So if you use consistent color, it can increase your brand recognition by up to 80%. So even just looking at these colors that I've centered on this slide, you may already be able to recognize these 3 brands. So there's no words associated here, no logos associated here. And at the same time, these colors are speaking and they're reminding us of these brands because we automatically recognize Starbucks, McDonald's, and Tiffany's just by associating these colors with those brands. The same can be true for you. So be sure that when someone's on your website, when someone's on your social media, that they're not confused because you're using a wide array of colors, but that you've really narrowed your color choices to be able to achieve optimal recognition. The next thing you want to do to achieve your ultimate brand impact is to write your rule book. Your rule book should not be long. This should not be stacks and stacks. It shouldn't really be a book. This should maybe say page. If you keep it to 1 page, then it's a lot easier to implement and to integrate. So you want to be sure that all of the things that we've discussed today get put into a 1-page document, that you distribute that throughout your team so that your team can be empowered to implement this in every piece that they create and every part of the customer experience that they represent, that they are aligning their interactions and their work with your brand voice using your brand rulebook. Get really specific. These are words that we use. These are words that we don't use. This is a part of our vocabulary. These are things that we're always going to stay away from. And be sure that you utilize this rulebook and that you encourage your team to utilize this rulebook so that you gain a lot of consistency that will enable your brand voice to be recognizable and achieve the impact that you're really after. The last thing that you can do is to keep reviewing and refreshing this. So this isn't something that should be reviewed and refreshed every month, but it is something that you should come back to regularly. Establish an annual check-in. Know that when you introduce a new product or a new service, or there's been a shift internally in your company, that likely means that you're going to need to shift your brand voice documents, right? That you're going to need to go back to that rule book and revise it a bit and say, hey, our target customer actually is different now. And so because of that, we need to consider who our target audience is now and how do we need to change the way that we're speaking so that we're still connecting with the audience that we're after so that we can create the impact that we want. Know that your company is going to continue to evolve and grow, and your brand voice will need to evolve and grow with your company. Will need to shift as the market changes so that you can still stay relevant and achieve the impact that you really want. The last thing that I want to mention is that it's okay to enlist experts. So you may be at the end of this webinar going, oh my God, that was really overwhelming. I appreciate all of the tools that you've given us, but I don't even really know where to begin. And so reaching out to a team like Content Journey is a really easy way for you to achieve the impact that you're after. We use expertise for things that we're not ready to take on. Maybe you just don't have the capacity to do that. So know that it's always good to enlist experts because capturing your brand voice in a really meaningful way and making sure it's integrated throughout your content is a really powerful way for you to be able to achieve big impact. So if we aren't connected already, here are some ways that you can connect with our company. If anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or you can email them to me directly. We'll stay on for just a few more minutes and go over questions. But first, I just want to remind you that if you haven't already signed up for our website, I encourage you, signed up for our newsletter, I encourage you to go ahead and hop over to our website, sign up for our newsletter. Next week, we're going to be releasing our Build Your Own Brand or Build Your Brand Voice Toolkit. And that's something you don't want to miss out on. It's a great resource that's really going to help you take this to the next level. We really love working with brands at Content Journey to achieve great impact. So I hope that we get to connect with you and your brand and help you achieve greater impact. Thanks so much for joining me today. And if you want to stay around for the Q&A, hang around and we will continue talking.